accustomed to that yet? God bless you. I see you're all sneezing. We've all got the sneezies. So I just feel like it's all stuck, like all that phlegm pollen is stuck in my throat. It's just seasonal. Yeah. All right. So today we are going to start factoring trinomials. So up to this point, we have learned how to factor using two methods. So our first method of factoring, and the one that we always rely on, is to look for a GCF. That is the most important first rule of factoring. First thing you want to do always is look for a GCF. The second thing that you want to do, well, that's not true. Don't put second. The other method that we learned, the only other method that you learn is you know how to factor with grouping. And when we started factoring by grouping, we said specifically this only works with what? Look at your grouping notes from the first couple of days that we started factoring by grouping. We said this only works with what? It's a certain number of terms. Huh? Not like terms. How many terms do you have to have if you want to factor by grouping? 4. This only works if you have 4 terms. This only works if you have 4 terms. Thank you. So factor with grouping, 4 terms, right? 4 terms next to that. So that's the only other method that we've learned. So we've only dealt with quadratic polynomials, right? If it has 4 terms, it's called a polynomial. So today we're going to work with quadratic trinomials. So our polynomial that we're working with today is really a trinomial. And this is the standard form. This is how all quadratic trinomials look. And you'll use this form ax squared plus bx plus c in math 2. And you'll use this form ax squared plus bx plus c in math 3. And you'll use this form in pre-calc and in trig. And if you take math 4, this form never goes away. Ax squared plus bx plus c. A and b are the coefficients, right? Because they're attached to the variable terms, right? That's why they're coefficients. They're hooked to variables. C doesn't have a variable, right? It's just a number. So C is a constant, all right? So the rule when you factor a trinomial, is we write the polynomial as a product of 2 simpler polynomials. We're going to write them as a binomial, just like we've been doing with our, sorry, I can't talk in right. Binomial times a binomial. Just like when we've been factoring by grouping, we've ended up with a binomial. But in this case, since we only have 3 terms, we have to multiply and factor using the distributive property. So we're basically undoing, when we say that we're factoring, we're undoing the distributive property. So we're going to factor ax squared plus bx equals, or plus c, when a equals 1. So that means that my leading coefficient, or the number in front of the x, is a 1. Well, if the number in front of the x is a 1, do we typically write it? No. Yeah, we don't even write it, okay? So I'm going to just make a trinomial that we're going to factor, okay? So the trinomial that we're going to factor, and I need to make this nice and big so I can fit it in here. We're going to try to factor the trinomial x squared minus 3x. Thank you so much. Minus 54. That's the trinomial that we're going to factor. So a, my leading coefficient, is 1. Notice that I just don't write it, right? We don't write 1x squared. It's just not typical. So the way that we factor is, it says to find the 2 factors, you have to take a times c. Well, I make a little table for that. So off to the side, I'm going to write a times c, and I put a dot over it to mean multiply. And then it says that sum to b. So then I write the word b, and I put a plus above it. And this is no different, God bless you, than our warm-up that said, what are 2 numbers that multiply to blah, 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 and add to blah, blah, blah? Do you guys remember that activity that we did? What are 2 numbers that multiply to negative 45, right? So we're going to do that same thing. So we have to figure out what A times C is. Well, A is 1 and C is what? Negative 54. So what is 1 times negative 54? It's negative 54. So what are two numbers that multiply to negative 54 and add to, what's the value of B? What's the value of B? Negative 3. Okay. So we have to list all of the factor pairs of negative 54. So calculators up. Y equals negative 54 divided by X. Y equals negative 54 divided by X. Get your calculator up. Y equals negative 54 divided by X. You just hit enter. That's it. Y equals negative 54. Are you in the Y equal category? Yeah. Negative 54. Oh, divided by X. So you are using the times button. X, the variable, is that button right there. Okay. Now hit second graph. Perfect. Okay. So starting with the whole number 1, what do we get? 1 and negative 54. Keep going. 2 and negative 27. Keep going. 3 and negative 18. Keep going. 6 and negative 9. Keep going. 9, negative 6. 18, negative 3. 27, negative 2. And 54, negative 1. Which one of these factor pairs, when I add them together, gives me a negative 3? Which factor pair, what is the sum of these two when I add these two together? What's 1 plus a negative 54? Yeah, that's not going to work for us. What's 2 minus 27? That's not going to work for us. What's 3 minus 18? Not going to work. What's 6 minus 9? These are the two factors that I want to use. 6 and negative 9. So when you fill out this is called an X. Some people call it a diamond, but it's an X factoring or an X chart or whatever. Like they're like, make your X, let's factor. So when you fill this out, this top, like the top part of your X, it says that's the product of AC. That's negative 54. The bottom is the sum of B. They sum to B. Well, what is B? It's negative 3. And then you put your two factors right here. We're using 6 and negative 9. So when A equals 1, when the number attached to X squared is 1, the factors that you choose, these are the factors that we choose, are actually the factors that you use. So the only thing that we're going to do is clean that up because I don't like that X plus a negative 9. So when I rewrite this as a product of two binomials, I have X plus 6 times X plus a negative 9 is the same thing as minus 9, right? So that's how we're going to factor that. Okay. So we have 6 examples that we're going to do. So remember, in this box right here, like in the top of our X, we're putting A times C. What is A times C? Anyone? A times C. It's 12. 1 times 12 is 12. What is the value of B? What is the value of B? It's 8. What are two numbers that you can multiply together to get to 12 that when you add them, you get to 8? 2 and what? 2 and 6. Yeah. 2 times 6. When I multiply these two, I get 12. When I add these two, I get 8. Absolutely. So those are my factors that I'm choosing. So that means those are the factors that I'm using. And since both of the factors are positive, We just write it as x plus 2 times x plus 6. That seems a little bit easier than making like factor by grouping, finding a twin, all that stuff, huh? Yeah. So let's look at our next one. So remember, this top is going to be A times C. The bottom is going to be B. So what is A times C? 12. A times C is 12. Oh, I don't know why those are so gigantic like that. A times C is 12. And what is my sum going to be? What am I looking for the B value? What is my B value? -7. So let's see. Numbers that I can multiply together to get 12 that add up to -7. Let's see. 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Do we see anything that adds up to a +7? What? 3 and 4. So what if I use -3 and -4? Does a -3 times a -4 give me a +12? It does. So your factors are actually going to both be negative. And when we did our warm up that one day, remember we made a column of like, hey, what is the product? What is the sum? Let's talk about our factors. So if you have a positive product and a negative B value, that means that both your factors are going to be negative, right? So this is going to be not 3 times 3. Sorry, that should be -4. So we write this as x plus -3 and x plus -4, but we're going to clean that up again because we don't typically write something plus a negative, right? So how can I write those two binomials? Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So remember the factors that you choose. So we chose a -3 and a -4, x -3, x -4 are the factors that you use. It works just like that. Just like that. So let's try it again. So this one is the polynomial or the trinomial x squared minus 18x plus 80. What is A times C? You have to do the A times C every single time. You have to know it. A is the first term, C is the last term. The first term is a 1. We just don't write it. So 1 times 80 is what? 80. What is the value of B? -18. Okay. So here is another one like the one before that. When your product is positive and your B value, or the number you're looking to sum, right, is negative, that means both factors are going to be negative, right? So what two numbers can you multiply together to get 80 that give you a sum of +18? That's 1 and what? 1 times 18? To multiply to 80. Give you a sum of 18. Multiply to 80. Let's see. 180, 240. I heard someone say it. 8 and 10. So we know that 8 plus 10 gives me a +18. So I'm just going to make both of those factors negative because a negative times a negative is still a positive, right? So my factors are -8 and -10. So that gives me x minus 8. I want you to write it as x minus 8 and x minus 10. Do you guys see what's happening here? Do you see that the numbers that you choose are going right into these boxes or these little ovals? Yeah. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's try the next one, number 4. So what am I looking for in the top of my x? What am I looking for in the top of the x? 40. A times C is 40. What am I looking for in the bottom of the x? 13. What are two numbers that you can multiply together to get 40 that when you add them, you get 13? 5 and what? 8. Yeah. 5 and 8. Those are both positive. So x plus 5, x plus 8. X plus 5 times x plus 8. Let's look at the next one. What's the value of the top of the box, or the top of the X, going to be? -7. What's the value of the bottom of the X going to be? -6. What are two numbers that you can multiply together to get a -7? So remember, if you get a negative product, one of the factors has to be positive and one has to be negative. I'm going to write a little note here. One's got to be positive and one's got to be negative, right? Because if they're both negative, you're going to end up with a positive product. So two numbers that multiply together to get -7, that when you add them, you get what? -6. 1 and -7. Let's see. -1, God bless you. Or sorry, +1 times -7 gives me my -7. That works on the time side for sure. And then if I do +1 plus a -7, I get a -6. That's perfect. Perfect. So x plus 1, x minus 7. X plus 1 times x minus 7. Okay, I'm going to set up the box, but you guys are going to do number 6 by yourself. So what's going in the top of the X? Top of the X is a -10. Bottom of the X is a 9. So because I have a negative product, that means one of my numbers, one of my factors is going to be positive and one's going to be negative. You guys don't do any shout outs. Think about it. I'll give everybody a minute. I don't think you need a minute, but I'll give you a minute. Everybody can have a minute.